Elara, a feral young woman who has spent 6 years alone in no man's land guarding the grave of the only person who ever loved her, survives through brutal winters while honoring the memory of the woman who rescued and raised her. Everything changes when Alpha King Kael Voss discovers that the grave belongs to his long-lost mother, a former Luna who was secretly exiled by corrupt council members and left to die. While investigating the truth, Kael realizes that Elara is his fated mate and brings both her and his mother's remains home. As Elara slowly recovers from years of starvation and isolation, she uncovers a conspiracy involving powerful council members who feared the ancient Luna Prime bloodline carried by Kael's mother and unknowingly by Elara herself. Facing hostility, political schemes, and an official challenge meant to disgrace her, Elara embraces her true power and publicly reveals herself as a rare Luna Prime, earning the loyalty of the entire pack. The conspirators are exposed and punished. Kael finally avenges his mother and Elara, and Kael complete their mating bond before the pack. The story ends with Elara becoming Luna of the Kingdom, carrying Kael's child and standing beside the grave of the woman who brought them together, realizing she has gone from guarding a lonely grave in the wilderness to protecting an entire kingdom and the family she never thought she would have. The sixth winter was the worst. Not because of the cold, though the cold had teeth this year, biting through the ragged wolf pelt she wore like a second skin until her ribs ached with each breath. Not because of the hunger, though her stomach had long since stopped growling and settled into a dull, permanent cramp that she barely noticed anymore. The sixth winter was the worst because the grave was sinking. She pressed her palms flat against the frozen earth, feeling the slight depression where the ground had settled another inch overnight. Her fingers were cracked at the knuckles, the skin split open in thin red lines that wept when she flexed them. She could smell her own blood iron and copper mixing with the frost and the dead pine needles scattered across the burial mound. "I will fix it," she whispered to the grave. Her voice was raw, unused for days, maybe weeks. Time moved strangely in the no man's land between the Silvercrest and Ironmoor territories. No pack claimed this strip of dead forest, no patrol walked these paths. That was why she had chosen it. That was why she had survived. Elara scraped frozen dirt from the base of a nearby embankment, filling her palms with clumps of icy soil that she packed carefully over the depression. Her wolf, weak and half dormant inside her, stirred with the effort. Not enough food, not enough warmth. The wolf had retreated deep years ago, curling into something small and quiet in the furthest corner of Elara's mind. She could still feel it breathing barely. The headstone was not really a headstone. It was a flat river rock she had carried from the creek bed 4 winters ago when the creek still ran before freezing solid each November. She had scratched letters into it with a smaller stone patient and precise the way the woman beneath the earth had taught her to be patient and precise about everything. The letters read, "Here rests a gentle heart. No name. Names were dangerous in no man's land." Names attracted scavengers, both the animal kind and the wolf shifter kind. Rogues who picked through abandoned territories looking for anything of value. A named grave suggested someone worth robbing. Elara sat back on her heels and pressed her hand flat against the mound the way she did every morning. The earth was frozen hard as bone beneath her palm. "The creek froze early this year," she said quietly. "I had to melt snow for water. You always hated snow water. Said it tasted flat." She paused, tilting her head as if listening. The wind moved through the dead pines carrying the scent of nothing. No wolves for miles. "Good. I caught a rabbit 2 days ago. Set the snare the way you showed me with the loop low because they duck their heads when they run scared. It worked. I saved the pelt for patching." She talked to the grave every morning and done so for 6 years. It was the only conversation she had. The woman beneath the earth had been the only person who had ever touched Elara without intent to harm. Had brushed her matted hair with patient fingers, had shared her meager food when Elara was too small to hunt, had pressed her warm palms over Elara's ears during the worst nights when the rogues howled close and the sounds of violence carried through the thin walls of their shelter. Elara had been 8 when she found the woman wounded in the borderlands. She had been 14 when the woman died slowly over the course of a terrible autumn when her cough turned bloody and her skin went the color of old candle wax. Elara had dug the grave herself with hands too small for the task, and she had stayed. She had stayed because she had nowhere else to go. She had stayed because a feral omega with no pack, no family, and a wolf too weak to shift fully was worth nothing to anyone. She had stayed because this was the only place in the world where someone had once loved her, and the ground still held that warmth even frozen. She was 20 years old, she looked older. 6 winters in no man's land did that. Elara stood her knees cracking and pulled the wolf pelt tighter around her shoulders. She needed to check her snare line, needed to find more firewood, needed to reinforce the lean-to before the next storm hit because the wind had torn a gap in the eastern wall last night and she had woken to snow on her face, crusted in her eyelashes, melting into the hollow of her throat. She turned toward the tree line and stopped. The scent hit her before the sound, before the sight. It came through the frozen air like a crack in glass, sharp and sudden and impossible to ignore. Pine resin and wood smoke and something deeper, darker, like the mineral smell of hot stone after rain. Her wolf, dormant for years, lurched upright inside her so violently that Elara staggered. Her hand shot out, gripping the rough bark of the nearest pine to steady herself. The wolf was awake. Fully, completely, thrashingly awake for the first time since Elara was 16 and had nearly died of a fever that lasted 9 days. The wolf pressed against the inside of her skin, pushing, straining, and Elara's vision flickered gold at the edges. No. No, no, no. She heard them then. Hooves, the creak of leather, the clink of metal on metal, and beneath it all the low vibration of wolves in shifted form, their massive paws hitting frozen ground in a rhythm that shook the earth beneath her bare feet. A patrol, a large one, coming from the east from Iron Moir territory. Elara's survival instincts fired faster than thought. She dropped low, pressing her body against the base of the pine, making herself small. The wolf pelt blended with the dirty snow and dead undergrowth. She was good at disappearing, 6 years of practice, but her wolf would not be still. It clawed and howled inside her, straining toward the approaching scent with a desperation that made Elara's teeth chatter. Mate. The word rose from somewhere primal, somewhere she had no control over. Mate, mate, mate. Shut up, she hissed under her breath to her own wolf. Shut up, shut up. The patrol broke through the tree line. She counted 12 shifted wolves, massive and dark-furred, flanking a group of 6 riders on black war horses. The wolves moved with military precision, their formation tight, their heads low and scanning. They were not rogues, they were trained, disciplined, deadly. And at the center of the formation, on a horse so black it seemed to absorb the weak winter light, sat a man who made Elara's wolf slam against her ribcage hard enough to bruise. He was enormous. Even mounted, she could see the breadth of his shoulders beneath the fur-lined cloak, the thickness of his arms where they held the reins with casual, absolute control. His hair was black and cut short, revealing the strong column of his neck and the edge of a scar that ran from behind his left ear down beneath his collar. His jaw was sharp enough to cut shadowed with dark stubble, and his eyes were scanning the tree line with a predator's focus. Amber gold, bright as lantern light in the gray winter morning. The Alpha King of Iron Moor. Elara had never seen him, had only heard his name in the fragments of conversation that drifted through the borderlands when rogues passed too close to her territory. Kael Voss, the Wolf King, the man who had united 3 packs under one banner through blood and war, and the kind of ruthless strategy that made other alphas submit or die. He had taken the throne at 22, they said had killed his predecessor in single combat, had never taken a Luna. He was riding through no man's land, he was riding toward the grave. Elara's blood went cold in a way that had nothing to do with winter. She watched pressed flat against the earth as the patrol slowed. The king raised one hand, a minimal gesture, and the entire formation stopped with the kind of instant obedience that spoke of absolute authority. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, his boots hitting the frozen ground with barely a sound despite his size. He was walking. He was walking toward the clearing, toward the grave. Elara's fingers curled into the dirt. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her wolf had gone eerily still, watching, waiting, focused on the man with an intensity that paralyzed her limbs. The Alpha King stopped at the edge of the clearing, his nostrils flared. Elara watched his face change. It was subtle, a tightening around his eyes, a slight parting of his lips. He breathed in, again deeper this time, and something shifted in his expression. Something broke. He walked to the grave. He stood over it, looking down at the flat river rock with its scratched letters and his hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled into fists so tight that Elara could see the tendons stand out on the backs of them even from 30 feet away, Your Majesty. One of the riders spoke, a tall man with a close-cropped beard and the bearing of a beta commander. What is it? The king did not answer for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough at the edges, like gravel sliding over stone. This is her grave. The beta dismounted quickly, striding forward. Are you certain I can smell her? The king's voice cracked on the word, a hairline fracture. Beneath the earth, 6 years of frost and decay, and I can still smell my mother. Elara's breath stopped in her chest. His mother. The gentle woman who had brushed Elara's hair, who had shared her food, who had pressed her palms over Elara's ears during the worst nights, who had died slowly, coughing blood, her skin going to wax. The woman had never given her name, had said it was safer that way, had said that names could bring danger to them both. Elara had accepted it the way she accepted everything in those years, with the trusting simplicity of a child who had been given kindness for the first time and would not risk it by asking questions. The Alpha King's mother, the former Luna of Iron Moor, the woman who had disappeared 14 years ago, declared dead by the pack, mourned in a ceremony Elara would never have known about, lost. And Elara had been guarding her grave for 6 years. The king crouched beside the mound, pressing his palm flat against the earth in exactly the same gesture Elara used every morning. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle jumped beneath his skin. He held himself very still, but Elara could see the fine tremor in his shoulders, the controlled vibration of grief held on a very short leash. She was tended. His voice was barely above a whisper. He traced the edge of the mound with his fingers, touching the packed earth, the fresh repairs Elara had made that very morning. Someone tended this grave. Recently. His head came up, nostrils flaring again, and this time his eyes tracked across the clearing with a different kind of intensity. He was scenting the air. Elara pressed herself deeper into the frozen ground, but she already knew. Her scent was everywhere here. 6 years of living, sleeping, breathing, bleeding in this clearing. There was no hiding it. His eyes found her. The gold of them was not warm. It was molten liquid, the color of a forge at full heat. It pinned her against the earth like a physical weight, and her wolf surged upward so hard that Elara felt her spine arch involuntarily, her muscles spasming. Mate. He crossed the distance between them in 4 strides, faster than something that large should move. He stopped 3 feet from her, looking down at the creature pressed against the base of the pine tree, and Elara saw his nostrils flare wide, saw his pupils blow black until only a thin ring of gold remained. He felt it too. "Who are you?" His voice came out rough, stripped of the careful control he'd maintained at the graveside. His wolf was pushing at his skin. She could see it in the way the air around him seemed to thicken, the way the shadows bent toward him. "Who are you, and what are you doing at my mother's grave?" Elara looked up at him from the ground. Her cracked hands, her matted hair, her hollow cheeks, and the dirt ground into every line of her skin. The wolf pelt that stank of years. She knew what she looked like, what she smelled like beneath whatever the mate bond was doing to their wolves. She smelled like a feral animal, like starvation and survival and nothing worth claiming. "I buried her," Elara said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "She died in my arms. I buried her, and I stayed." Something moved across the king's face, a wave of emotion so complex and so quickly controlled that Elara could not name all its parts. Grief, rage, something that might have been wonder. "You knew her," he said. "She took care of me." Elara swallowed. "When I was small, she found me, or I found her. I was 8. The word came out like it hurt him. "She disappeared when I was 14 years ago. She was already sick when she found me, but she hid it well." The king was staring at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, not just looking, breathing her in. His hands were at his sides, but not loose, not anymore. They were held carefully away from his body, as if he did not trust what they might do. "My wolf," he said slowly, and his voice had dropped to something barely human, "is telling me something I need you to confirm." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed her back harder against the tree. "I do not know what your wolf is saying. You do." He took 1 step closer. The scent of him hit her full force at this distance, pine resin and wood smoke and hot stone. Her wolf keened inside her, a sound of desperate, agonized longing. "You feel it. Your wolf feels it. I can see it in your eyes." Her eyes, she realized, must be flickering gold. The wolf, pushing through. "It does not matter what I feel," Elara said, and she meant it with every fiber of her survival instinct, because she knew what she was. Feral, packless, and Omega so weak her wolf could barely surface. The Alpha King of 3 united packs could not have a mate like her. The idea was absurd, dangerous. "I am no one. I am nothing. I guard a grave. That is all I am. That is not all you are." He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers, and the closeness of him made her wolf thrash so violently she gasped. "You smell like moonlight on snow. You smell like the first breath after breaking the surface of water. My wolf has not reacted to a living creature in 12 years, and right now it is trying to tear through my skin to get to you." Elara pressed her palm flat against her own sternum where her wolf was battering against the inside of her chest. "I cannot be your mate. You are. I cannot. Cannot is not the same as are not. His eyes searched her face, tracing the sharp angles of malnutrition, the dirt, the small scar at the corner of her left eyebrow where a rogue's claw had caught her 3 winters ago. What is your name? Elara. Elara. He said it like he was tasting the word, testing its weight. Elara, who buried my mother when no one else was there. Elara, who has been guarding her grave alone for 6 years in winter in no man's land with no pack, no shelter, no... He trailed off, his gaze dropping to her hands, the cracked knuckles, the thin red lines weeping in the cold. His expression shifted, and what she saw there was not pity, it was fury. Controlled, directed, burning fury. Who did this to you? The question was quiet, lethal. Who left you here? No one left me, I was never anywhere to be left from. He reached out slowly, deliberately, the way one reaches toward a wounded animal. His hand hovered an inch from her cheek, and the heat radiating from his palm was shocking against the frozen air. He did not touch her. He waited. I'm going to take you from this place, he said. You are going to come with me. I cannot leave the grave. The grave is coming too. His eyes held hers. My mother is coming home, and so are you. Elara stared at him. No one had ever said the word home to her, not once, not in 20 years of living. The woman in the grave had given her kindness, warmth, care, but they had never called their lean-to a home. It had always been a hiding place, a survival measure. I do not have a home, she said. You do now. His voice brooked no argument. It was not a request, not an offer. It was a statement of fact from a man who reshaped reality to fit his declarations. You are my mate. You guarded my mother's resting place for 6 years when my entire kingdom failed to find her. You are coming home with me, Elara. She should have argued, should have run. Every lesson 6 years alone had taught her said to run from power, from attention, from anyone who might have the strength to hurt her. But her wolf was pressing against her skin with something that felt like relief, like arriving, like exhaling for the first time after holding a breath for years. The grave. She said again stubbornly, I will send my best men to exhume her with full honors. She will be reburied in the royal cemetery beside my father with the funeral she deserved. He paused. You will be there. You will tell me how she died. You will tell me everything. Elara searched his face for the cruelty she had learned to expect from powerful men, from alphas, from anyone with the strength to take. She found grief, found the mate bond burning behind his gold eyes, found a kind of desperate, barely contained need that mirrored her wolf's keening. She found the same expression the woman in the grave had worn the first time she saw Elara small and feral and starving in the underbrush. The expression that said, here is something precious and broken, and I will not leave it behind. Okay, Elara said. The king finally let his hand close the distance. His palm settled against her cheek, warm and rough with calluses, and the mate bond roared through both of them like a river breaking through a dam. Elara felt her wolf surge to the surface stronger than it had been in years, and a sound escaped her throat that was half human, half wolf. A whimper, a greeting. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf answering hers. And for a moment, the air between them vibrated with something electric and ancient and utterly beyond their control. Commander, he said, without turning his head, without breaking eye contact with Elara, we are not going to the northern border today, Your Majesty. We are going home. The ride back to Iron Mountain territory took 3 hours. Elara spent it on the king's horse, wrapped in his cloak because she had started shaking and could not stop. The cloak smelled like him overwhelmingly, and her wolf purred inside her chest like a creature drugged on warmth. She had never ridden a horse, had never been this close to another person for this long. The king's chest was a wall of heat against her back, his arm around her waist, and she could feel the controlled tension in every line of his body, his wolf wanting to turn her, to press her closer, to bury its face in her neck. He held it back with iron discipline, and she was grateful. The patrol wolves ran on either side, and Elara caught their glances. Confusion, curiosity, something that might have been hostility, from 1 or 2 of them quickly masked when the king's gaze swept in their direction. She was filthy. She was feral. She was Omega. And she was sitting on the Alpha King's horse, wrapped in his cloak held by his arm. This would not go well. The Iron Mountain compound appeared through the trees like a walled city. Massive stone walls, guard towers, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. The gates opened before they reached them, sentries having spotted the patrol. People gathered, drawn by the unusual sight of the king returning from the wrong direction hours early with a bundle of rags and bones on his horse. Elara felt every eye, heard the murmuring, smelled the confusion and contempt rolling off the crowd like heat off pavement. "Do not look at them," the king said against her hair. "Look at me." She could not look at him. She was looking at the ground at her bare feet hanging against the horse's flank, at her own cracked and bloody hands clutching the front of his cloak. He dismounted first, then reached up and lifted her down as if she weighed nothing. His hands spanned her waist, and she felt how his fingers nearly met around her, too thin. She knew. She pressed her eyes closed as he set her on her feet. "Kael," a woman's voice, sharp and surprised. "What is this?" Elara opened her eyes. A tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair stood at the bottom of the compound steps, wrapped in an elegant wool dress the color of deep burgundy. Her bearing was straight-backed and commanding, and her eyes gray and assessing fixed on Elara with an expression of barely disguised horror. "Councilwoman Thera," the king said. His voice was formal, flat. "I have found my mother's grave." The compound went silent. The murmuring died as if cut with a blade. Thera's face went through several rapid transitions, shock, something that flickered too fast to catch careful, measured composure. "Your mother's grave," she repeated. "Where in the no-man's land, the borderlands between us and Silvercrest?" His hand was on Alara's back between her shoulder blades, and she could feel the weight of it like an anchor. "This woman buried her, has been guarding her resting place for 6 years. Thera's gray eyes moved to Elara, moved over her, cataloging the filth, the thinness, the bare feet on cold stone. "An omega," she said. Not a question, she could smell it. "My mate," the king said. The silence that followed was absolute. Then it shattered into a dozen voices at once, overlapping, questioning, protesting. The king ignored all of them. "She needs food, a bath, a healer, and a room," he said to a young woman in servant's clothes who had appeared at his elbow, wide-eyed. "My chambers, now. Your Majesty." Thera's voice cut through the noise with practiced authority. She was a member of the ruling council, Elara would learn later. The oldest member had served under the king's father and his mother and had been regent for 2 years before Kael came of age. "We must discuss this. A feral omega from no man's land cannot simply be declared. She is my mate." The king turned his head, and the look he gave Thera stopped her mid-sentence. "That is not a declaration I am making. It is a fact my wolf has confirmed. You may discuss it amongst yourselves if it amuses you, but the outcome will not change." He steered Elara toward the steps past Thera, whose gray eyes followed them with an expression that Elara could not read, but her wolf did not like. The inside of the compound was warm. That was all Elara processed at first. Warm in a way she had not been warm in 6 years. The kind of warmth that seeped into bone. She stumbled on the threshold, her legs unsteady. And the king's hand moved from her back to her arm, supporting her without breaking stride. "When did you last eat?" he asked as they moved down a corridor of dark wood and warm light. 2 days ago." "The rabbit." His jaw tightened. He said nothing else until they reached a heavy door at the end of the corridor, which he pushed open into a room that was larger than any shelter Elara had lived in combined. A fire burned in a stone hearth the size of her lean-to. The bed was enormous, covered in furs and dark fabric. The walls were lined with shelves holding books, weapons, maps. It smelled like him. Pine resin and wood smoke and hot stone. "Stay here," he said, guiding her toward the fire. "Food is coming. The healer is coming. I have to." He stopped. His hand was still on her arm, and she watched his fingers tighten reflexively, as if his body refused the idea of releasing her. His wolf surging against his control. "I have to organize the exhumation. My mother, I need to bring her home. I understand." He looked down at her standing small and filthy and shaking beside his hearth, and something in his expression cracked open briefly. Tenderness, maybe. Or devastation, both. "I will be back," he said. "Do not leave this room." He released her arm, turned, and was gone. The door closed. Elara stood alone in the warmth and the firelight and the scent of her mate, and she began to shake harder, not from cold, from the absence of it. The healer arrived 20 minutes later, a gray-haired woman named Marin, who smelled of dried herbs and clean linen. She examined Elara with gentle professional hands, making small sounds of distress at what she found. Malnutrition, frostbite, scarring on 3 toes, the cracked hands, a rib that had healed crookedly from some long-ago injury, a small infection in a cut on her left shin that Elara had not even noticed. 6 years, Marin murmured, applying a warm poultice to the shin. 6 years alone in the borderlands. "Child, how are you alive?" "I am stubborn," Elara said. Marin laughed, a sound that surprised Elara. She had not heard laughter in a long time. "You are more than stubborn. You are Omega, yes, But your wolf, Maren, tilted her head the way healers did when they were sensing something beyond the physical. Your wolf is not weak, not anymore. Something has woken it, the mate bond, perhaps. But underneath there is something else. Elara said nothing. She did not know what the healer was sensing. Her wolf had always been quiet, small, barely present until today. Rest, Maren said. Eat when the food comes. I will return tomorrow. The food came. Broth, bread, dried meat, a cup of something warm and sweet that burned pleasantly in Elara's stomach. She ate slowly, knowing her shrunken stomach would rebel if she ate too fast. She had learned this lesson the hard way once years ago when she had caught 2 rabbits in one day and gorged herself and then vomited until she saw stars. She ate half the broth and 2 bites of bread before her body said enough. She curled into the chair beside the fire wrapped in the king's cloak still because she could not bring herself to remove it. And she slept. She dreamed of the woman in the grave of gentle hands braiding her hair, of a voice that hummed lullabies in a language Elara did not know but felt in her bones, of gold eyes she realized now. The woman had gold eyes the same shade as her son's. Elara woke to the sound of the door opening. The king entered, bringing cold air and the scent of pine from outside. It was dark beyond the windows. Hours had passed. He stopped when he saw her curled in the chair, still wrapped in his cloak, and something in his posture shifted, softened. You didn't use the bed, he said. I have not slept in a bed in 6 years. He crossed the room and crouched before her chair, putting himself below her eye level. A deliberate choice, she understood. Making himself smaller, less threatening, a man his size with his power choosing to kneel before a feral Omega in his own chambers. Tell me about her, he said. Please. So Elara told him. She told him about finding the woman or being found by her in the borderlands. A small girl, orphaned at birth, abandoned by whatever pack had considered an Omega pup too weak to feed, running feral in the forest, more animal than child. And this woman, already thin and coughing, sometimes had crouched down and opened her hands and said, Are you hungry? She told him about the years that followed, the lean-to they built together, the snares the woman taught her to set. The herbs she showed Elara how to identify, the way she told stories at night, stories about a pack she had once belonged to, about a son she missed with every breath, about a life she could never return to, because the people who had driven her away would kill her if she tried. Who drove her away? Kael asked. His voice was very quiet, very controlled. His eyes were not controlled. They burned. She never told me their names. She said there were people in the pack who wanted her gone, who feared something about her bloodline. Elara paused. She said she was dangerous to them simply by existing. My father died when I was 15, Kael said slowly. Killed in a border skirmish, the council took over governance until I came of age. My mother disappeared 3 months after his death. They told me she had gone mad with grief, run into the wilderness, that search parties had found nothing. She was not mad. No. The word came out hard as stone. She was not mad. She was driven out by my own council, by people I have been ruling alongside for a decade. His hands, resting on his thighs, curled into fists again. That same white-knuckled tension she had seen at the graveside. She loved you, Elara said, because it was true and because the expression on his face was terrible. She talked about you every day. She said you were strong and good and that you would be a great king. She said she was proud. He closed his eyes. His throat worked. For a long moment he was silent, and Elara watched the firelight play across the hard angles of his face, and she felt her wolf reach toward him with something that was not desire. It was recognition. It was comfort. She lifted her hand, hesitated, then placed it on his fist, her cracked fingers against his scarred knuckles. His eyes opened at the contact, gold and wet, and he turned his hand over beneath hers, opening his fist, letting their palms press together. You kept her safe, he said, even after she died. You kept her safe. She kept me alive first. I owed her everything. You owe her nothing. You gave her more than this entire pack gave her in death. His fingers closed around hers, careful of the cracks, gentle in a way that seemed at odds with the size of him. You owe nothing to anyone. Do you understand that Elara didn't understand it? She had never been told she was not in someone's debt. She did not know how to hold that idea. She did not answer, and he did not push. Sleep, he said, rising to his feet but not releasing her hand. Take the bed. I will sleep in the chair. This is your room. This is our room. The bed is yours tonight. She was too exhausted to argue. She let him guide her to the bed, let herself sink into furs that were softer than anything she had ever touched. The scent of him enveloped her, and her wolf settled into a purr so deep and steady that she was asleep before she could form another thought. 3 days passed. 3 days of warmth food, the healer's visits, and the king's presence each evening. 3 days of learning how to exist inside walls, inside warmth, inside the gravitational pull of a mate bond that grew stronger by the hour, tugging at her chest like a physical thread connecting her to wherever Kael was in the compound. She could feel him moving through the building, speaking with his council, training with his warriors. She could feel the low burn of his presence like a second heartbeat. On the 4th day, the trouble started. Elara was in the king's chambers, sitting by the window watching the compound below when the door opened without a knock. She turned, expecting Maron or the servant girl who brought meals. Councilwoman Theron stood in the doorway. She was taller up close than Elara had realized, and the gray eyes that surveyed the room were sharp with intelligence and something harder. Purpose. So Theron said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. The feral Omega who has bewitched our king. Elara stood slowly. Her wolf stirred uneasy. I have not bewitched anyone. You have not. Theron moved further into the room with the ease of someone who had once belonged here, who had perhaps spent years in these corridors, managing this compound, making decisions that shaped the pack. A creature appears from no man's land, claims to have buried the former Luna, and within hours our king declares her his mate. His wolf has been dormant for years, unresponsive to every eligible female presented to him, and suddenly she spread her hands. You arrive, filthy feral Omega. The mate bond is not something that can be fabricated. The mate bond can be mimicked. Thea's voice dropped, took on a quality of careful instruction as if she were explaining something to a child. There are herbs, enchantments, ways to make a wolf believe it has found its fated match. I have done nothing like that. Thea studied her for a long moment, then she did something unexpected. She sighed. It was not theatrical. It was tired, the sigh of a woman who had been carrying weight for a very long time. I believe you, she said quietly, and then even more quietly. That is what makes this dangerous. Elara waited. I was on the council when his mother was driven out. Thea held up a hand before Elara could speak. I did not order it, I did not orchestrate it, but I knew it was happening and I didn't stop it. I told myself it was for the stability of the pack, for the boy who would become king. I told myself many things. She looked at the fire. I have told myself those things for 14 years. There it was, not a confession of villainy, something worse, a confession of cowardice, of complicity through inaction, of the kind of moral failure that could not be atoned for because it could never be undone. She died slowly, Elara said. Over months. She coughed until her lips were always red. Thera flinched, actually flinched, a physical jolt that ran through her tall frame. Her mouth pressed into a line so tight it went white. I know what I am, Thera said after a moment. I know what I allowed, but I am telling you this, because the ones who did orchestrate it, they are still here. Still on the council, and they will not tolerate you any more than they tolerated her. Why? Because you are his mate, and if you are truly his mate, you will become Luna, and a Luna with the king's full devotion is a Luna with power, power they cannot control. Thera straightened, gathering her composure around her like armor. Watch Councilman Drevik, watch his sister Vera. They are the ones who arranged for Kael's mother to disappear. They will try the same with you. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. For whatever it is worth, she said without turning around. I am glad someone was with her. At the end. The door closed. Elara stood alone in the warm room, her heart pounding. She told Kael that evening, told him everything Thera had said. Watched his face go through stages of fury so intense that the shadows in the room seemed to deepen around him, his wolf pressing at his skin until the air crackled. Drevik, he said. The name came out like a curse. He was my father's beta. He led the search parties that found nothing. He stood at the memorial ceremony and spoke of his love for my mother with tears in his eyes. Thera said he orchestrated it. Thera, another complicated note in his voice, Thera who knew and said nothing. She seemed burdened by it. Burdened. He laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. She is burdened. Good. He paced the length of the room, every line of his body coiled tight. Then he stopped to turn to Elara. I will not move against them tonight. I need proof. I need my mother's body examined by the healers. I need to know exactly what they did and how. His eyes found hers. But I swear to you, Elara, they will answer for it, every single one of them. I believe you, and you. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands rising to frame her face. She did not flinch anymore when he touched her, had stopped flinching on the 2nd day. You are not safe until they are removed. You understand, they will see you as a threat. I have survived 6 winters alone in no man's land. I can survive politics. The corner of his mouth twitched almost a smile. Politics is colder than winter, little wolf. Then I will need a warmer cloak. He did smile, then brief and sharp, and his thumbs traced the line of her cheekbones. She had been eating regularly for 4 days, and already the hollows were less severe. The healer said her body was responding faster than expected, that something in her was healing at an accelerated rate. Your wolf, he said, his expression shifting to something more serious. Maren says it is changing, growing stronger every day. I feel it. She says it shouldn't be possible. An Omega wolf does not grow in strength without significant lineage behind it. She thinks your wolf was suppressed by starvation, by isolation, by fear. And now that those pressures are removed, it is waking up. Yes, his gold eyes searched hers. Do you know who your parents were? No. I was abandoned as a newborn. No pack, no family, no markings. We will find out. His voice held the quiet certainty of a man who had never made a promise he could not keep. We will find out who you are. Elara. 2 weeks passed. Elara grew stronger daily, filling out with regular food, her skin losing its gray pallor, her hair revealing its true color, once clean, a dark reddish-brown like autumn leaves after rain. The cracked hands healed, the infection in her shin cleared. The wolf inside her grew and grew, pressing at her boundaries with increasing insistence. She could shift now. Not fully, not yet, but partially. Her eyes would go gold for minutes at a time, her nails would sharpen. Once startled by a door slamming, she felt her canines extend, and the servant girl had dropped a tray of food and run. Kael was patient, teaching her, showing her how to breathe through the shifts, how to control the wolf's impulses rather than suppress them. He shifted with her sometimes in the private courtyard behind his chambers. His wolf, a massive black beast that made the other shifted wolves look like juveniles. He would lie beside her in wolf form, his enormous body radiating heat while she struggled to coax her wolf past half shifts. Stop fighting her, he said once in human form, crouching beside her where she knelt on the cold stones, frustrated and trembling. You have been fighting her your whole life, pushing her down. She needs to trust that you will not cage her again. I was not caging her. I was surviving, I know. But she does not know the difference. Let her out, Elara. She will not hurt you. He was right. The next time she tried, she stopped fighting, stopped controlling, and her wolf surged forward like water released from a dam. The shift took her in a rush of heat and restructuring bones, sliding muscles, reshaping, and then she was on 4 legs smaller than Kael's wolf, but not as small as she had expected. Her fur was dark red, the color of her hair, and Kael's wolf made a low rumble in his massive chest that vibrated through the ground. She could feel his approval through the bond, his wonder, his possessive, triumphant satisfaction at seeing her whole for the first time. Her wolf was not an Omega's wolf. She could feel it now, the power in her limbs, the clarity of her senses, the way the other wolves in the compound looked at her when she passed them in the corridors. Not with dismissal, with confusion, with unease. She is not Omega. Maren confirmed one morning after another examination. She registers as Omega to surface scent, but the wolf beneath, I have only felt that kind of resonance once before. The healer paused, choosing her words carefully. In the former Luna and Kael's mother. The room went very still. What are you saying, Elara asked. I am saying that whatever bloodline you carry, it is the same bloodline as the woman who raised you. The same rare frequency, the same deep earth resonance that the old texts call a Luna Prime. Maren's eyes were wide. You are not Omega, Elara. You were never Omega. You were suppressed, starved, isolated, until your wolf retreated so far inward that it registered as the weakest possible designation. But you are not. You are something very, very old. Elara thought of the woman in the grave of gold eyes and stories about a bloodline that made people afraid of the words, I am dangerous to them simply by existing. Kael's mother, Elara said slowly. She said her bloodline was feared. Is that what this is? Luna Prime is a designation that has not appeared in generations. The ability to bond with and stabilize any alpha, to amplify a pack's power exponentially, to heal through touch. Maren was speaking quickly now, excitement and fear mixed in her voice. The last recorded Luna Prime was over 200 years ago. The bloodline was thought to be extinct, but it was not extinct. No, it was hiding. In no man's land, in a woman who raised a little girl with the same blood. Elara sat very still. Am I related to her, to Kael's mother? I cannot say with certainty, but the resonance is identical. Cousins, perhaps. The same family line separated by a generation. Maren gripped her hands. Elara, this means the people who drove the former Luna away, who killed her through exile and neglect, they did it because they feared this power. And now you have appeared with the same power in the same pack as their king's mate. They will try to kill me, they will. Councilman Drevik was a tall man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and the build of a former warrior gone slightly soft at the edges. He had a voice like polished wood, smooth and practiced, and he used it the way a craftsman uses a fine tool. Precisely. Effectively. Elara had watched him from across the great hall for days, had seen the way he spoke to other council members. Always with a hand on their shoulder or arm, always leaning close, always the quiet word in the ear, rather than the public declaration. A spider, she thought, not a wolf, a spider sitting at the center of invisible threads. His sister Vera was different. Vera was loud where Drevik was quiet, bold where he was subtle. A tall woman with sharp features and a smile that never reached her ice-blue eyes, she commanded a group of female wolves who deferred to her in all things. A lunar in waiting, people called her, though not within Kael's hearing. She had presented herself as a potential mate to the king 3 separate times over the past decade and been refused each time. Elara could feel Vera's hatred from across any room. It was a tangible thing like heat from a forge, directed and focused and patient. On the 18th day since Elara's arrival, Drevik made his move. It was subtle. Of course it was subtle. A whisper campaign among the pack questions raised in council concerns about the king's judgment, about enchantment, about manipulation, about the convenient timing of a feral Omega appearing with claims about the former Luna. She could have desecrated that grave, Vera said loudly in the great hall during a meal, not bothering to lower her voice. Could have dug it up herself and placed it there to manufacture a story. How do we know she did not murder the woman and then use her grave as a prop? Several wolves murmured agreement. Elara, seated at the king's table by his insistence, felt the words like stones thrown at her back. Kael's hand closed over hers beneath the table. Let them talk, he murmured. The exhumation results will be here soon. The healers are examining her remains. The truth will silence them. But Elara could feel something else. Something building. The whispers were not just words, they were preparation. On the 23rd day, the healer who had been examining the former Luna's remains was found unconscious in her workroom. Her notes were gone. Every record of her examination vanished. Kael's fury shook the compound literally. His wolf erupted from his control during the council meeting where the attack was reported and the walls trembled with the force of an alpha's dominance being unleashed at full power. 6 council members dropped to their knees involuntarily, 2 fainted. Drevik remained standing. His expression was carefully, precisely horrified. His voice was steady as he expressed his shock, his outrage, his deep concern. But Elara was watching his hands, and his hands were perfectly still at his sides. No tremor, no surprise. A man who was already exactly where he expected to be. It was him, she said to Kael later in their room. His room. Their room. She could not yet think of it as theirs. He was not surprised, not for a single second, I know. Kael was pacing again that caged predator rhythm. I know it was him, but without the healer's notes, without proof, what proof do you need beyond the mate bond, beyond Thera's testimony? Thera will not testify publicly. She is complicit. To accuse Drevik is to condemn herself. He stopped pacing, looked at Elara with an expression she was beginning to recognize. The expression of a man who saw a path forward but didn't like it. There is one way. Tell me. A Luna's challenge. An old law. If a pack member formally contests the claiming of a Luna, the Luna may answer the challenge by demonstrating her worthiness before the pack. If she proves herself, the challenger is bound by ancient law to submit or face exile. What does worthiness mean? It depends on the challenge, usually a demonstration of power of the wolf's true nature. His eyes held hers. If you are truly Luna Prime, Elara, a challenge would force your wolf to emerge fully in front of everyone undeniably. And if I fail, you will not fail. If I fail, he was silent for a moment. If you fail, the challenger may demand the bond be severed. Exile for the failed Luna. Elara thought of no man's land of the cold of 6 winters alone. I will not go back there, she said. Not because she feared it, she had survived it once and could again, but because she did not want to. For the first time in her life, she did not want to be alone. You will not go back there. Kael crossed to her, his hands finding her shoulders gripping firm. You will never be alone again, but I need you to trust me. And I need you to trust your wolf. I do not know what she can do. Then we will find out together. The challenge came 3 days later. Farah issued it formally in the great hall, standing tall in a dress of midnight blue, her ice blue eyes fixed on Elara with a triumph she did not bother to hide. "I challenge the king's chosen mate," Vara announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed hall. "On the grounds that she is not what she claims that she is, Omega, that she is unworthy, that she has manipulated our king through deception and sorcery." The hall exploded in sound. Kael rose from his throne, but Elara caught his wrist. His eyes snapped to her blazing gold, his wolf raging at the surface. "Let me answer," she said quietly. "Let me answer her." He looked down at her hand on his wrist, at her face still thin but no longer hollow, her eyes steady, her wolf burning gold behind her irises. He sat back down, his jaw was clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. Elara stood, the hall fell quiet, every eye on her. The feral Omega who had arrived in rags, who had slept in dirt for 6 years, who was now standing in clean clothes with color in her cheeks and gold in her eyes. "I accept the challenge," she said. Her voice did not waver. Vara smiled. 3 days hence in the arena, bring your wolves. Little Omega if you have one." The 3 days were a blur of preparation. Kael worked with her every hour, pushing her wolf to the surface, teaching her to hold the shift to control it without suppressing it. The wolf came more easily each day, and each day it was stronger, bigger, the dark red fur crackling with something that was not just physical. "You feel that," Kael said on the second night his wolf pressed beside hers in the courtyard. That vibration, that resonance. She did feel it. A humming in her bones, a warmth that extended beyond her body, reaching outward like roots spreading through earth. When she pressed against Kael's wolf, the vibration intensified and she felt his wolf respond. Felt it stabilize, calm, center, in a way that was not about dominance or submission, but about balance. "Luna Prime," he murmured back to human, naked and unself-conscious in the cold air. "You amplify. You balance. You are what holds the pack together at its core." She shifted back beside him, and he wrapped his cloak around both of them, pulling her against his chest. I am afraid, she admitted, the first time she had said it aloud to him, of the challenge of being seen, truly seen. "For 20 years I survived by being invisible, small nothing worth noticing." She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the pine and wood smoke and stone. "If I stand in that arena and my wolf emerges fully, I can never be invisible again. You were never invisible to me." His arms tightened around her. "From the first breath I took of your scent in that clearing, you were the most visible thing in the world. That is the bond." "No." His hand found her chin, tilting her face up. "The bond told me you were mine, but I see you because of who you are. The woman who guarded a grave in winter for 6 years out of love. The woman who talked to the dead because she had no one living to talk to. The woman who survived when surviving was the hardest possible thing to do." His thumb traced her lower lip. "That is not the bond, that is you." She kissed him, for the first time. Pressed up on her toes and put her mouth against his. And the bond roared through both of them like a forest fire. And his arms crushed her against him. And his wolf howled inside his skin. And hers answered. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard, gold-eyed wolves pressing at the surface. After the challenge, he said roughly, "After you destroy Vara in front of the entire pack, I am going to mark you. I am going to make you my Luna in every way that matters and several ways that are purely for my own satisfaction." Is that a promise or a threat? Yes. The arena was a stone circle in the center of the compound, ancient and worn smooth by generations of challenges, ceremonies, and rituals. The entire pack ringed the edges. Hundreds of wolves shifted and human watching, waiting. Elara stood at one end, Vara at the other. Vara had shifted. Her wolf was large for a female. Sleek and gray-white, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Functional, sharp, deadly. Elara was still human, still standing in her simple dress, bare feet on cold stone, her wolf pressing at her from inside like something trying to be born. "Shift Omega," Vara's wolf seemed to say through body language alone. The contemptuous pacing, the lowered head, the pulled back lips revealing teeth. "Come, show them what you are." Kael was in the stands, she could feel him. The bond between them vibrating with tension, with restrained violence, with the desperate need to intervene that he was holding back because she had asked him to. "Trust your wolf." Elara closed her eyes. She stopped fighting. For 20 years she had held her wolf back, had pushed it down, starved, it silenced it. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. A feral Omega could not afford a wolf that drew attention, could not afford power when power made people afraid, could not afford to be anything more than small, quiet, invisible. She was done being invisible. The shift did not come like Kael's shifts, all explosive power and controlled ferocity. It came like sunrise, gradual, then sudden, then overwhelming. The warmth began in her chest, spreading outward through her limbs, her bones, her blood. Her wolf rose not like an animal breaking free of a cage, but like a tide coming in. Inexorable, patient, ancient. She heard gasps from the crowd, felt the stone beneath her feet vibrate. When she opened her eyes, she was looking down at Vara's wolf from a height that should not have been possible. Her wolf was massive, larger than Vara, larger than any female wolf in the pack, nearly as large as Kael's, and her fur was not just dark red, but laced through with threads of gold that caught the torchlight like veins of metal and stone. The humming in her bones was now audible, a deep resonance that spread outward from her in waves. The pack felt it. She could see them react. Wolves pressing forward, drawn, humans going still, eyes wide, mouths open. The resonance reached them all, and it carried warmth, safety, the bone-deep sense of pack, of belonging, of home lunar prime. Vara's wolf had stopped pacing. She stood frozen, hackles raised, but beneath the aggression, Elara could see fear, could smell it sharp and acrid beneath the ice-blue wolf's composure. Elara did not attack, did not snarl, did not posture. She simply stood and let her wolf be seen. The resonance intensified, every wolf in the arena felt it, and one by one they began to respond. Bowed heads, exposed throats, the ancient instinctive response to a lunar prime's presence, not submission born of fear, recognition born of something deeper. Vara held out the longest. Her gray-white wolf trembled, legs locked, refusing. But the resonance was not a command, it was a truth, and the truth once felt could not be unfelt. Vara's wolf lowered her head, not all the way, not a full submission, but enough. Enough for the pack to see, enough for the challenge to be answered. The arena erupted not in violence, in sound, in howls. Dozens, then hundreds of voices lifted in the wolf's greeting. The sound that meant pack, that meant Luna, that meant home. Elara stood in the center of it, gold-threaded and enormous and trembling with the force of being finally completely undeniably herself. And through the bond she felt Kael, his pride, his love, his wolf howling with the rest of them loud enough to shake the sky. What happened next happened fast. Drevik ran. Within an hour of the challenge's conclusion, he was gone from the compound, having slipped out through a service gate while the pack was still gathered in the arena. He took nothing, left everything, ran like a man who knew that every moment of delay was a moment closer to death. Kael sent hunters after him immediately. 12 of his best trackers shifted and tireless, following a scent trail that led east towards Silvercrest territory. They found him at this border, not because he was difficult to track, but because he had stopped running. He was standing at the border marker, a tall stone carved with pack symbols, and he was not alone. Thera was with him. When Kael arrived, flanked by his warriors and with Elara at his side in wolf form, he found Drevik on his knees in the snow and Thera standing over him with a knife at his throat. I could not stop them 14 years ago. Thera said, her gray eyes steady on Kael's face. I can stop him now. Put the knife down, councilwoman, Kael said. His voice was calm, the lethal kind of calm. He will talk, he will try to bargain, he will name others to save himself, and half of what he says will be lies designed to fracture your council further. Thera's hand was steady. The knife did not waver. I know this man. I have watched him operate for 30 years. He is a poison that seeps. End it now. I said, put it down. Thera looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Elora's wolf standing beside the king, gold-threaded fur, bright even in the gray winter light. Something shifted in Thera's expression. She lowered the knife. Drevik was shaking. His iron composure, his polished wood voice, his careful political mask all gone. He was an old man on his knees in the snow, and he was afraid. Kael, he said, and his voice broke on the name. Kael, please. Your mother was... There were reasons. The lunar prime bloodline is destabilizing it, shifts the balance of power too far toward the alpha pair. The council loses all authority. The pack becomes, my mother died coughing blood in a lean-to in no man's land. Kael's voice cut through Drevik's rambling like a blade. She died slowly in pain with an 8-year-old child as her only companion because you were afraid of losing power. It was not just me. It was never just me. There were others. There are always others. The system did not drag my mother from her bed at night. The system did not forge documents declaring her mad. The system did not sabotage every search party sent to find her. Kael stepped forward, and Drevik flinched so violently he nearly fell sideways into the snow. You did that, you and Vara and whoever else you will name in the hours before I decide your punishment. Drevik looked up at Elora's wolf, the girl he whispered. The Omega girl, she is the same blood. If you let her become Luna, in 20 years, someone else will. In 20 years, Kael said quietly. If someone tries to harm my Luna, I will not send search parties, I will not hold council meetings, I will burn the world down to its roots and salt the earth where it stood. He looked at his warriors. Take him, take them both. Separate cells. I want to names, dates, and details before sunrise. The warriors moved. Drevik went without resistance, sagging into their grip like a man who had finally set down a weight too heavy to carry. Thera went differently. She walked with her spine straight and her head up, and as she passed Kael, she stopped. I will tell you everything she said, every name, every detail, and then you may decide what I deserve. I will, he said. She nodded, walked on, did not look back. Elora shifted back to human standing barefoot in the snow, and Kael immediately wrapped his cloak around her. An automatic gesture. He barely seemed to notice he was doing it. She tried to help us, Elora said, watching Thera's retreating back. At the end. She failed my mother for 14 years before that. I know, I am not saying she deserves forgiveness, I am saying she is not the same as him. Kael was quiet for a moment, his arm around Elara's shoulders, both of them standing in the snow where his kingdom ended and no man's land began. No, he said finally, she is not the same, but the damage is. He turned her toward him, his hands on her shoulders. Are you all right? I am cold. He almost smiled. Then let us go home. Home. The word still felt strange in her mouth, but less strange than yesterday, less strange than last week. The marking ceremony took place on the first day of the 7th winter. It was not a grand affair. Kael had wanted it immediately, had wanted to claim her publicly the moment the challenge was won. But Elara had asked for time. Time to understand her wolf. Time to learn the pack. Time to stop flinching when rooms were too loud and crowds pressed too close. He gave her the time without complaint, waited with the patience of a man who had found his mate after a decade of silence from his wolf, and was not about to rush the only thing that had ever mattered to him. The ceremony was held in the great hall before the full pack on a winter evening when the fires burned high and the walls were hung with the deep green and gold of Iron Moor's colors. Elara wore a simple dress dark red to match her wolf, and her hair was loose down her back. No jewelry, no crown, those would come later, Kael said. For now, this was about them. She stood before him in the firelight, and he was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, dark and powerful and barely contained. His gold eyes burned as they moved over her face, and she could feel his wolf pressing at his skin, desperate, barely leashed. I claim you, he said, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall without effort. Before my pack, before the old laws, before whatever gods still watch. His hands found her face, tilting it, exposing the curve of her neck. You are my mate, my Luna, the heart of my pack. She felt his breath on her throat, hot, shaking slightly. I claim you too, she whispered, and she felt rather than saw his surprise. This was not traditional. The Luna did not claim. The Luna received. But Elara had spent 6 years guarding a grave, alone, had spent 20 years being nothing to no one. She would not stand passive now, would not simply receive. She pressed her hand flat against his chest over his heart and let her wolf's resonance flow through the contact. Felt him shudder. Felt the entire hall react as the Luna Prime's power touched them all, warming, connecting, anchoring. I claim you, she said again, louder now. The man who knelt before me in his own chambers, the man who brought my dead home, the man whose wolf called mine back from silence. She pressed up on her toes, her mouth near his ear. I claim you, Kael Voss, and I am never letting go. His control broke. His teeth found the curve of her neck, the marked spot where shoulder met throat, and he bit down. Not gently. The marking bite was pain and pleasure fused into something that transcended both, and Elora gasped as the bond between them solidified, became permanent, became a living thing woven into both their wolves, connecting them at a level deeper than bone. She felt him. Not just his presence, not just the pull him, his grief for his mother, his fury at the years lost, his desperate, overwhelming relief at having found her, his love fierce and possessive and absolute, and he felt her, all of her. The lonely child in the borderlands, the feral Omega talking to a grave, the woman who had chosen to stay when she could have walked away. The pack howled, the sound filled the hall, the compound, the territory. It carried into the night, into the winter air, into the no man's land, where a grave now stood empty, its occupant finally resting where she belonged. Kael pulled back, his mouth red, his eyes wild, his hands trembling where they gripped her waist. The mark on her neck throbbed in time with their shared heartbeat. Mine, he said. Simple, absolute, yours, she agreed. And then because she was Elora and she had never been good at submission, and you are mine. His laugh was quiet and full of wonder. Always, he said, Vera was exiled, stripped of pack status and driven into the territories with nothing the same way she had driven Kael's mother. Poetic Elara thought, but she didn't feel satisfaction watching it happen. Only the tired recognition that cruelty, even justified cruelty, leaves a residue. Drevik was not exiled, he was dead. Had been dead since the night of his arrest, found in his cell with a stopped heart. The healer said natural causes. Elara thought Thea might know more, but she did not ask, and Thea, who had been sentenced to 10 years of service in the pack's healing ward as penance rather than exile, did not volunteer. It was not a clean resolution, it was not a perfect justice. But it was done. Elara stood at the royal cemetery on a cold morning 3 months after the marking, looking down at the new grave. A proper headstone this time, carved by the best stonecutter in the territory. The inscription was longer than the one Elara had scratched into a river rock 6 years ago. Sarah Voss, beloved Luna, mother protector of the lost. Beneath it, in smaller letters, at Elara's request, she kept the wolves from the door. Kael stood beside her, his arm around her waist. The winter was breaking. She could smell it in the air, the faint green beneath the frost, the stirring of things dormant. I talk to her sometimes, Elara said. Still is that strange no. I tell her about you, about the pack, about how loud it is here all the time and how I am getting used to it. Slowly, she paused. I tell her about the pup. His arm tightened. She felt his breath catch the way it had caught when she had told him 2 days ago. The healer's confirmation, 8 weeks along, a spark of new life humming alongside the bond between them. Does she answer? He asked. His voice was rough. No. She never answered before either, but I always felt like she was listening. He pressed his face into her hair, breathed her in. His wolf rumbled in his chest, low and constant, to the sound of absolute contentment. I think she brought us together, he said quietly. I think she knew about the bloodline, about the bond we would have. I think she found you deliberately. She was dying, she was alone and dying in no man's land. And she found the one person in the world who would care for her grave until her son could come. Who would stand exactly where I needed to find them when my wolf was finally ready. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. She was always smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Elara looked down at the grave, at the carved stone with its careful inscription, at the frost melting at its edges, little rivulets of water catching the weak winter sun. She thought of the flat river rocks still sitting in their chambers on the shelf above the fireplace. Here rests a gentle heart, the first headstone she had made with her own cracked hands years ago in the cold. She pressed her palm against her stomach where the pup grew, felt the warmth of the bond, felt the pack's resonance humming through her hundreds of wolves connected to her heartbeat anchored by her presence. She was not guarding a grave anymore, she was guarding a kingdom, a mate, a future. But she had learned how to guard things in no man's land in winter with nothing but her own stubbornness and the memory of gentle hands. Everything after that was easy. Kael's hand covered hers on her stomach. His wolf hummed. The frost melted at the edges of the grave, and somewhere beneath the frozen earth, spring was already beginning.